12 world-renowned specialists stood around the dying king of the Orlando underworld, shaking their heads. His organs were failing. Toxicology was clean. They gave him 48 hours. But it wasn't a Harvard-educated doctor who saved Don Lorenzo. It was Beatrice, the 300-pound maid they didn't even look at twice. Lorenzo Moretti was a man forged in the brutal, unforgiving fires of the Orlando Syndicate. For 20 years he had ruled his empire from a sprawling, heavily guarded estate in Highland Park, Illinois. He was a man of iron will and terrifying vitality, surviving 2 assassination attempts, a federal RICO indictment, and the violent betrayal of his own cousin. But at 58, Lorenzo was brought to his knees, not by a bullet, but by a microscopic, invisible enemy that was eating him alive from the inside out. It started on a Tuesday in late October. Lorenzo, usually a man of boundless energy, who sparred in his private gym at dawn, complained of a lingering fatigue. By Friday, his skin had taken on a terrifying sallow hue. By Sunday, he was coughing up blood, his heartbeat erratic, his kidneys failing. The estate was immediately locked down. His underboss, Sebastian Rossi, took control. Sebastian was a sharp, immaculately tailored man with cold eyes and a mind like a steel trap. He bypassed standard hospitals. A dying Don in a public ward was a target, and instead brought the hospital to the estate. Within 48 hours, the master bedroom had been transformed into a state-of-the-art intensive care unit. Sebastian spared no expense, using a sprawling web of dark money and favors to fly in 12 of the top medical minds in the country. There was Dr. Arthur Pendleton, Chief of Cardiology at Northwestern Memorial. Dr. Richard Caldwell, a world-class toxicologist from Johns Hopkins, and a small army of hematologists, nephrologists, and infectious disease experts. They ran every test known to modern medicine. They set up portable MRI machines, drew vial after vial of blood, and pumped Lorenzo full of broad-spectrum antibiotic steroids and fluids. They tested for heavy metals, exotic venoms, radiation poisoning, and rare autoimmune disorders like Goodpasture syndrome and Wegener's granulomatosis. Every single test came back negative. His liver enzymes are off the charts and his creatinine levels are climbing by the hour, Dr. Pendleton whispered furiously to Dr. Caldwell in the grand hallway outside the bedroom. His ejection fraction is dropping. It's acute systemic failure, but there's no pathogen, no poison. It's as if his body has simply decided to self-destruct. We've pushed maximum doses of atropine and amiodarone just to stabilize his heart. Caldwell rubbed his temples, exhausted. If this is a toxin, it's something that metabolizes instantly and leaves zero footprint. But frankly, Arthur, I think it's just a catastrophic cascade failure. He's dying. Invisible to these brilliant men standing just a few feet away with a basket of fresh linens was Beatrice Higgins. Beatrice was 32 years old and completely unnoticeable to the men who ran the Moretti family, despite taking up more physical space than anyone else in the room. She was heavily overweight, tipping the scales at over 340 pounds. Her uniform, custom-made by a sympathetic seamstress in the city, constantly clung to her back with sweat. Walking up the grand staircase left her breathless, her knees aching under the crushing burden of her own mass. The young mobsters who guarded the doors often made crude, hushed jokes as she waddled past. They called her the Rhino behind her back. But Beatrice possessed 3 things that no one in the Moretti household gave her credit for: a fierce, unwavering loyalty to Lorenzo, an incredibly sharp mind, and the distinct advantage of absolute invisibility. Because everyone dismissed her as just the fat, slow maid, nobody stopped talking when she entered a room. Nobody hid their true faces. Lorenzo had hired her 5 years ago when she was living out of her car, desperate and destitute. He hadn't looked at her with disgust. He had simply looked at her work ethic, nodded, and handed her the keys to the estate staff quarters. "Keep my house clean." "Be, and you'll always have a roof," he had said in his gravelly voice. Now her boss was dying, tethered to a dozen beeping machines, his chest rising and falling in shallow, rattling gasps. Beatrice felt a profound, heavy grief pressing against her chest, a pain far worse than the chronic ache in her joints. She shuffled into the bedroom, her heavy rubber-soled shoes squeaking softly against the imported Italian marble. The room smelled intensely of medical antiseptic, masking the subtle, expensive scent of Lorenzo's favorite Tom Ford cologne. 6 doctors were clustered around the bed, staring at a bank of glowing monitors, completely ignoring her as she began to gather the discarded medical packaging and used towels scattered across the floor. Sebastian stood by the window, his arms crossed his face, a mask of solemn sorrow. But Beatrice, glancing at him from the corner of her eye, noticed something unsettling. Sebastian's right foot was tapping a rapid rhythmic beat against the floor. It wasn't the frantic tap of a man terrified of losing a mentor. It was the impatient, eager tap of a man waiting for a timer to go off. "We need to discuss end-of-life protocols." Dr. Pendleton announced, his voice carrying a grim finality. "His organs are shutting down. He has maybe 48 hours before he slips into a hepatic coma. We can keep pushing the dialysis, but it's like using a bucket to bail out the Titanic." Sebastian let out a ragged, theatrical sigh, covering his eyes with one hand. "Do what you can to make him comfortable, Doctor. He deserves a peaceful end. No extreme measures. He wouldn't want to live like a vegetable." Beatrice's hands tightened around a soiled towel. No extreme measures. Lorenzo Moretti was a man who fought tooth and nail for every inch of territory he owned. He would absolutely want extreme measures. He would want them to cut him open and restart his heart with their bare hands if they had to. "I'll inform the rest of the family," Sebastian said softly, stepping out of the room. The doctors slowly began to disperse, moving to the adjoining study to draft their final medical reports, leaving only a junior nurse to monitor the machines. Beatrice remained in the room. Her lower back was screaming in agony. The sheer physical toll of carrying over 300 pounds of weight while bending, lifting, and cleaning for 8 hours a day was brutal. She needed to sit down. She always needed to sit down when doing the baseboards or cleaning under the heavy mahogany furniture. Puffing slightly, Beatrice lowered her heavy frame onto a small, plush footstool near the corner of Lorenzo's bed. She let out a quiet groan of relief as the weight came off her swollen ankles. From down here, the world looked different. She wasn't at eye level with the arrogant doctors or the calculating underboss. She was at the level of the wires, the tubes, and the underbelly of the medical machinery. She pulled a microfiber cloth from her apron and began dusting the intricate carved legs of the bedside table, her mind racing. The doctors said it was an internal failure. No poison, no infection. But Beatrice knew Lorenzo's routine intimately. She washed his clothes, prepared his bathroom, managed his pantry. Nothing had changed. Nothing except the sudden presence of Sebastian, managing Lorenzo's daily vitamins over the past month, claiming he was looking out for the boss's health. Beatrice scrubbed a spot of dried mud off the table leg. As she leaned back to catch her breath, she looked up. Because of her position, sitting practically on the floor to save her aching knees, she had a clear, unobstructed view, looking directly up at the heavy, clear plastic bags of IV fluids hanging from the tall metal pole beside Lorenzo's bed. The doctors, all tall, capable men who stood upright, only ever looked at the digital readout on the IV pump at waist height or at the patient in the bed. They never looked up at the bags themselves because they were the ones who hung them. They assumed the sterile Ceylon and nutrient bags pulled straight from sealed hospital boxes were untouched. But from her low vantage point, Bathed in the sharp backlight of the bedside lamp, Beatrice saw it. Near the very top of the primary saline bag, just below the reinforced plastic seam, was a tiny, almost microscopic condensation ring. Beatrice squinted, leaning her heavy torso awkwardly to the side to get a better angle. There, hidden from anyone looking straight on, was a microscopic puncture mark, a needle hole, and around that hole the plastic had a faint, cloudy yellow residue. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at the other bags hanging on the rack. The secondary bag delivering his heart medication had the exact same cloudy ring at the top. Someone was injecting something directly into the IV bags after they were hung. The doctors were testing Lorenzo's blood for poisons, but his kidneys and liver were already failing. Whatever was being put into his system was breaking down, instantly masking itself as organ failure, and the doctors were too busy looking at the symptoms to look at the source. Beatrice struggled to her feet, her joints popping loudly. She moved closer to the IV pole. She knew chemistry not from a university, but from 15 years of mixing industrial cleaning solvents to remove blood wine and grease from fine fabrics without burning the house down. She leaned in and sniffed near the top of the bag. It was incredibly faint, masked by the hospital smell, but it was there. A sweet, cloying scent, like bitter almonds and rotting garlic, phosphine, or something terrifyingly close to it. A heavy-duty, fast-acting neuro and organ toxin. But where would Sebastian get something like that? She remembered a delivery that came to the estate 3 weeks ago. Agricultural supplies for the vast private greenhouses Sebastian managed on the south side of the property. Zinc phosphide, used as a heavy-duty rodenticide. Ingested, it was deadly. Injected directly into the bloodstream via a saline drip, it would cause sudden, catastrophic, multi-organ failure, mimicking a severe autoimmune crisis. And it metabolized into gas, leaving the blood clear of typical heavy metals by the time the doctors drew their labs. Beatrice heard footsteps approaching in the hall. Heavy, deliberate steps. Sebastian! Panic flared in her chest. She couldn't just yell for the doctors. Sebastian paid the guards. He controlled the house. If she accused the underboss without undeniable proof, she wouldn't just be fired. She would be dead buried in a shallow grave before the sun went down. She had to get proof. She had to secure the tainted bag, and she had to figure out how to administer the antidote before Lorenzo flatlined. Thinking faster than she ever had in her life, Beatrice grabbed her cleaning cart. She snatched a thick, sterile biohazard bag from the lower shelf and, with surprising speed for her size, reached up and clamped her hand around the top of the IV bag. Just as the brass doorknob began to turn, Beatrice did the only thing she could think of. She threw her massive weight against the metal IV pole, sending it crashing to the floor in a tangle of wires, plastic, and beeping alarms. The sound of metal striking the imported marble floor was deafening. Glass shattered. The digital alarms on the life support machines immediately began to shriek, a piercing, high-pitched wail that shattered the heavy silence of the estate. The heavy mahogany door flew open almost instantly. Sebastian stood in the frame, his hand instinctively resting inside his tailored suit jacket, near his shoulder holster, his dark eyes wide with shock. Behind him, Dr. Pendleton and Dr. Caldwell pushed past their faces, pale with panic. "What the hell is going on in here?" Sebastian roared, his gaze sweeping the chaos. Beatrice was on the floor, sprawled awkwardly, amidst a puddle of sterile saline, tangled wires, and the fallen metal pole. Her heart was beating so violently against her ribs, she thought it might break through her chest. This was the moment. She had to play the role they had all assigned to her. She had to be the clumsy, pathetic woman they looked right through. "I'm so sorry, oh dear God, I'm so sorry." Beatrice wailed, her voice trembling. She struggled to push her massive frame off the slippery floor, intentionally letting her arms give out, so she flopped back down, splashing the fluid. My bad knee just gave out. I lost my balance. I tried to grab the pole to steady myself, and I pulled the whole thing down. I'm just a clumsy, stupid woman. I'm so sorry." She buried her face in her hands, feigning tears of profound embarrassment. It was the perfect cover. Sebastian sneered, a look of unadulterated disgust crossing his sharp features. "You useless fat cow," he spat, stepping over a puddle to inspect the machines. "You could have killed him. Get her out of here before I have her thrown out a window." "Just get out, Beatrice," Dr. Pendleton said, highly agitated, as he rushed to silence the blaring alarms. "Caldwell helped me get this line re-established. We need a fresh bag of saline and amiodarone now." "Already on it," Dr. Caldwell muttered, ripping open a sealed box from the corner supply stack. Under the guise of her humiliating, tearful retreat, Beatrice used her large apron to sweep the ruptured, tainted IV bag against her chest. Because of her substantial girth, the thick folds of the white cotton apron easily concealed the crumpled plastic. She dragged herself up, keeping her head bowed, and hurried out of the room as fast as her aching joints would allow. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind her. She didn't stop in the hallway. She waddled directly to the downstairs staff bathroom, locked the door and collapsed against the sink, gasping for air. Her hands shook violently as she pulled the plastic bag from her apron. The tiny needle hole was undeniable. The cloudy yellowish residue was still there. She had the weapon. Now she needed an executioner. She couldn't save Lorenzo herself. She needed someone with the medical authority to administer the cure, and she needed someone who wasn't on Sebastian's payroll. Dr. Richard Caldwell was a man of science, a toxicologist from Johns Hopkins, who had looked genuinely defeated by his inability to solve the Don's failing health. If anyone would listen to raw physical evidence, it was him. Beatrice waited in the shadows of the grand foyer for nearly 2 hours. Her legs throbbed, the veins in her calves burning from the strain of standing still, but she refused to sit. Finally, the study door clicked open. "Doctor," Caldwell stepped out, rubbing his exhausted eyes, heading toward the kitchen for coffee. As he passed the alcove near the grand staircase, Beatrice stepped out. "Dr. Caldwell." Caldwell jumped, spilling a drop of hot coffee on his wrist. "Jesus, Beatrice!" "You scared the life out of me. Look, I don't have time." "You're looking for a ghost." Beatrice interrupted her voice, entirely stripped of the submissive, breathless tone she usually used. It was low, firm, and steady. "You can't find the toxin because it's not coming from his environment, and it's not a slow-acting poison. It's being fed directly into his veins, metabolizing instantly." Caldwell stared at her, utterly bewildered by the sudden shift in the maid's demeanor. "What on earth are you talking about?" Beatrice reached into the deep pocket of her apron and pulled out the folded biohazard bag. She flicked on the small art display lamp, illuminating a nearby Renaissance painting, holding the bag directly under the harsh halogen beam. "Look right here, just beneath the seam," she instructed, pointing a thick, calloused finger at the plastic. Frowning, Caldwell leaned in, pulling a pair of reading glasses from his breast pocket. He squinted at the spot. His breath hitched. "Is that a puncture mark?" "Yes," Beatrice said grimly. "And look at the residue around it. You smell that faint garlic almond odor. 3 weeks ago, Sebastian Rossi ordered 200 pounds of industrial zinc phosphide for the estate's south greenhouses. It's a heavy-duty rodenticide. If someone were to dissolve it and inject it directly into the Don's IV lines while you were all looking at the monitors." "My God!" Caldwell whispered, the blood draining from his face. It would cause immediate, catastrophic oxidative stress, massive tissue damage, rapid organ failure, and because it breaks down into phosphine gas in the bloodstream, standard heavy metal and toxicology screens wouldn't catch it unless we were specifically looking for the gas byproducts. It mimics acute systemic failure perfectly. He looked up at Beatrice, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and absolute terror. Sebastian is doing this. The underboss. He's waiting for the Don to die so he can take the seat, Beatrice said. You have to save him, Doctor. If it's phosphine poisoning, there is no direct antidote. Caldwell panicked, pacing the small alcove. The damage to his myocardium and liver is immense. He's already slipping away. You have an entire portable ICU upstairs, Beatrice countered, stepping into his path, her massive presence forcing him to stop and focus. You have intravenous lipid emulsion therapy. You have high-dose N-acetylcysteine to fight the oxidative stress. You have a dialysis machine. If you know what the poison is, you can flush it. You can support his organs until they clear the toxin. Caldwell stared at the 300-pound maid, realizing in that singular moment that she possessed a sharper deductive mind than the 12 highly paid specialists upstairs. If we change the treatment protocol, Sebastian will know we're on to him. He has heavily armed men stationed outside the doors. We'll be dead before the medication even kicks in. Then we don't tell him, Beatrice said, her eyes turning cold and calculating. We let Sebastian think he won. The heavy oak doors of the master suite clicked shut, and the lock engaged with a resounding metallic thud. Inside, the atmosphere instantly shifted from a space of mourning into a frantic, high-stakes battleground. Dr. Caldwell and Dr. Pendleton moved with the kind of synchronized, silent precision only seasoned trauma specialists possessed. Pushing the 20% lipid emulsion now, Dr. Caldwell whispered. His hands shook slightly as he hooked a milky white bag of fluids to a fresh, uncontaminated IV line. Loading a massive dose of N-acetylcysteine. We need to flood his system and fight the oxidative stress. Pendleton, get the dialysis machine running at absolute maximum clearance. Beatrice retreated to the far corner of the room, her massive frame pressing against the floral wallpaper to stay out of the doctor's way. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm matching the beeping of the heart monitor. She watched as they manually pushed medications to stabilize his crashing blood pressure. The room, previously smelling of sharp medical antiseptic, now carried the heavy scent of nervous sweat and the faint ozone hum of the overtaxed medical machinery. For 3 agonizing hours, the war raged inside Lorenzo's veins. Outside the locked doors, the estate was filling with dangerous men. The gravel driveway crunched constantly under the tires of heavy black SUVs. The top earners and capos of the Orlando syndicate were gathering in the grand dining room downstairs, summoned by Sebastian Rossi to witness the passing of the torch. Every minute that ticked by felt like an eternity to Beatrice. If Sebastian realized the doctors were actively reviving his boss instead of letting him slip away, he would have his armed guards kick the door off its hinges and slaughter everyone inside. But by the 4th hour, a miraculous, undeniable shift occurred. The harsh, terrifyingly erratic alarms of the cardiac monitor began to steady. The sharp peaks and valleys smoothed out into a solid, rhythmic, beautiful hum. The sickly yellow-gray pallor of Lorenzo's skin slowly gave way to a flush of real oxygenated blood. His blood pressure is finally stabilizing, Dr. Pendleton breathed, dragging a forearm across his profusely sweating forehead. Liver enzymes are plateauing. The lipid sink is working. By God, Caldwell, we're pulling the toxin directly out of his tissues. Suddenly, the thick fingers of Lorenzo's right hand twitched. Beatrice gasped instinctively, taking a heavy step forward. Don Lorenzo. Slowly, agonizingly, Lorenzo Moretti opened his eyes. For a fleeting second they were clouded and unfocused, the eyes of a man who had been knocking on death's door. But then clarity rushed in, bringing with it the fierce, unmistakable fire of the syndicate's apex predator. He blinked his gaze, darting to the ceiling, then to the terrified faces of the two doctors, and finally settling on Beatrice. "Be!" he rasped. His voice sounded like dry gravel, weak but holding its natural commanding baritone. Why are you crying?" "Because you're alive, sir," she whispered, a watery, relieved smile breaking across her face. Before Lorenzo could fully process his surroundings, the heavy brass doorknob rattled violently. "Doctors!" Sebastian's voice boomed through the thick wood, dripping with rehearsed theatrical grief and absolute authority. "The entire family has gathered. Open this door immediately. It is time." Lorenzo's dark eyes snapped to the door. The sick, dying old man vanished entirely. He read the sheer terror on the doctors' faces, noted the locked deadbolt, and saw the fierce, protective stance of his maid holding the ruined IV bag. "Sebastian!" Lorenzo breathed out, his jaw tightening into a dangerous line. "He poisoned your IV bag, sir," Beatrice said, rapidly stepping close to his ear so the men outside couldn't hear. "He used agricultural rat poison from the south greenhouses. He's waiting for you to die so he can take your seat." Lorenzo closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds, absorbing the massive betrayal of his own underboss. When he opened them, his gaze was devoid of mercy. He looked at the trembling chief of cardiology. "Unlock the door." "Sir, he has heavily armed men out there," Pendleton stammered. "Unlock it," Lorenzo commanded, a terrifying strength flooding back into his tone. Pendleton practically crawled to the door, turning the deadbolt. Sebastian pushed the door open violently. Behind him stood Dominic Lorenzo's hulking head of security, along with 3 other high-ranking capos. They had removed their hats, fully expecting to pay their final respects to a corpse. Sebastian stepped over the threshold, his head bowed. "My brothers today, we lose a titan of Orlando." He froze. The words died in his throat. The color instantly drained from Sebastian's immaculately groomed face. Lorenzo Moretti was sitting up, propped against his pillows. He looked battered, but his dark eyes were locked dead onto Sebastian's face, burning with lethal intent. Beside the bed stood Beatrice. She no longer looked like the submissive, invisible servant. She stood tall, an imposing, immovable mountain of loyalty at the Don's right hand. "You look disappointed, Vincenzo," Lorenzo said quietly. The soft menace in his voice froze the blood of every man in the room. "Don Lorenzo," Sebastian stammered, taking a clumsy step backward. A miracle, the doctors told me." "The doctors missed it," Lorenzo interrupted coldly. He gestured slightly toward Beatrice. "But Beatrice didn't. She found the needle marks in my bags. She found the zinc phosphide. You tried to put me down like a dog, you treacherous bastard." Dominic, the head of security, slowly unbuttoned his suit jacket, his hand moving to the grip of his heavy pistol. The other capos exchanged dark, knowing looks, subtly shifting their weight to block the only exit. "Lies," Sebastian shrieked, panic shattering his suave facade. "She's a crazy fat maid. You're going to believe this. This wail over your own underboss." "Dominic," Lorenzo said softly. "Yes, boss," Dominic replied smoothly, drawing his weapon and aiming it squarely at Sebastian's chest. "Take him down to the soundproof room in the basement. I want to know exactly who helped him smuggle the poison. And when he's done talking," Lorenzo paused, "make sure he understands the penalty for treason." Sebastian's terrified screams echoed down the grand hallway as he was dragged away, growing fainter until the heavy basement doors sealed his fate. The room fell silent. Lorenzo dismissed the doctors, leaving only him and Beatrice. She instinctively reached for her cleaning cart, her adrenaline fading. "I should get back to the laundry, sir." "Stop," Lorenzo said. He reached out his hand. "Come here, Bey." Nervously, she waddled closer, placing her large hand in his. "For 5 years, I had a viper sleeping nearby, and a guardian angel scrubbing my floors." Lorenzo said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my life." "People don't look at me," she whispered, "so I look at them." Lorenzo gently pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with profound reverence. "You will never touch a mop again. From this day forward, you don't serve this family. You are part of it, and anyone who disrespects you answers to me." In the dark world of the Syndicate, Lorenzo had just found his true queen. If you were captivated by Beatrice's incredible courage and Lorenzo's fight for survival, don't keep this thrilling story to yourself. Hit that like button to support Beatrice's triumph. Share this with someone who loves a brilliant plot twist and subscribe to our channel for more intense, real-life drama and breathtaking romance stories every single week. Your support helps us bring more hidden heroes to light.